I've taken myself out of the studio and I am walking the dog. And while I was walking her, I thought I would give you guys a little update and have a chat and say Happy New Year. I wanted to talk to you guys about one of the questions that I get asked the most during my classes, which is, how did I get started? Being a full-time ceramicist or potter is quite an unusual job. I feel very, very lucky that I get to call it my job and that I get to make money making art and sharing this process with other people that I love so much. A bit of a background story on how I got started. So, I didn't always work in ceramics. I didn't study it at uni. My original career was in fashion, and it feels like a lifetime ago that I was working in fashion. Sorry, this light is going to be jarring. So I was a fashion editor on a men's magazine. I worked at PR agencies, again, men's fashion mostly, but sometimes women's. I worked in-house at some big brands doing content and editorial content for them. You know, how to wear your jeans 3 ways, all that kind of stuff. I was a stylist on TV shows, music videos, adverts, basically anywhere that people would wear clothes, I would dress them. Dress them as well as write about clothes and talk about clothes. And yeah, I loved it. It was my entire life until it wasn't. I'd been working in fashion from the age of 16. I started interning in PR agencies, and I'd managed to become a fashion editor, one of my ultimate goals, before I even turned 30. So I kind of got to my early 30s and I felt old. I felt like the industry that I had built my career on, it was essentially crumbling around me. You know, I'd built a career on sinking sand. Magazines were not what they were when I was studying, when I was in my LCF, when I was like 20, you know. Let's not forget that I was at LCF 21 years ago. But we won't talk about that. So, yeah, I was suddenly faced with a lot of choices, you know. Learn about digital stuff and go to an agency, which I did. Not quite the same. Or, you know, think about what else I might be able to do. So I thought, what else could it be? I'm quite entrepreneurial. So I had to go a few different things. I was working as a freelance social media and content person for a while. Makes sense, right? God, it's sunny. I had to go at doing floristry, at making organic skincare. I went on holiday to Lisbon. Marlo, come back! And it was while I was on holiday, and I've told this story 100 times before, but it's still like, you know, you talk about getting those light bulb moments. This was my light bulb moment. I was working at the time in this digital agency, which was very stressful. Managing a team, you know, lots of different clients, blah, blah, blah. Commuting an hour and a half every day to London. And I needed this time out. So I'd walked into this little shop. If you've been to Lisbon, they have incredible ceramics there. So I walked into this little shop, and in there was just this woman who was sat, an older woman, maybe in her 60s. And she had a coffee. She had a fag on. She had her little dog sat by her feet, and she was just painting a tile. And her shop sold these stunning painted tiles. And I just looked at her and I was like, this is an option. This is an option. I was so conditioned and squished from the rat race of constantly trying to push forward, constantly trying to get ahead, constantly trying to make more money. You know, it never occurred to me that I could just breathe and still be making a living and actually be doing something that I really love. Not that I didn't love fashion. I studied art, kind of, you know, I did an art foundation and I did a linking course at LCF, some of which was figurative drawing and photography and blah, blah, blah. So I've always kind of done art, but I hadn't done a lot of ceramics. I've done a little bit of ceramics during my art foundation, but it wasn't throwing on the wheel or anything. It was all sculpture. So I was like, right, wow, okay, cool. I want to learn how to make tiles. I didn't have any foresight beyond that. I saw a woman making tiles and I thought, wow, tiles will be the thing then, tiles are the one. So I came back and I signed myself up to a course with a very nice lady who has a studio, still has a studio in Totteridge called Linda Zeff. Now, Linda has a really cool little studio off the side of her house. If you're in Totteridge, go check her out. And she is predominantly a sculptor. So she also has a very meticulous way of working. So I went in and I was like, I want to learn how to make tiles. And she was like, cool, okay, well, here's a bit of clay. Here's how you do it. But I sat and I made 4 tiles, and that was it over the space of a term, because she teaches you properly. She makes you slow down and sit and focus, and she's not scared to tell you if you need to work a bit more on something that I maybe could take a leaf out of her book as a teacher. But yeah, she's not scared to be like, this isn't done yet, go back, smooth those edges, that's going to be sharp, that's going to be rough. And when I say I sat and I learned to compress and roll this piece of clay out to, you know, just make these very smooth tiles, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. My hands touched the clay and I fell in love with the process, totally. And that was it, basically. And that was, well, this would be my 11th year of starting ceramics. But like I say, I was still working in fashion, and I continued to work in fashion for 4 years after that. And ceramics was my hobby. I went to an evening class with Linda for a while. And when I decided I really wanted to focus on wheel throwing, she gave me a couple of lessons, but it's not her bag. And the thing is, you'll know when you work with when you learn from a certain teacher and they're really into something, you remember this from school, if they really love something, you're going to learn about it better. So as much as she gave me a fantastic introduction to ceramics, I wanted that hands-on wheel time. So I left her class, and then I started with another incredible teacher who is also in North London called Ricky Grimes, who has a fantastic studio in his garden as well. And he is a wheel thrower. He is a fantastic wheel thrower. And when you get to his class, I mean, I remember walking in and the vibe was so different from Linda's. Linda's, everyone's just sat down, really quiet, really chill, really focused. And Ricky's is just like packed with people jumping on the wheels, everyone like finding corners, like just getting in there to just get their clay time. And I was like, all right, cool, maybe this is a little bit more faster paced for me, basically. So I remember just getting there, and again, I would go there once a week and I would sit on the wheel, 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 sit on the wheel. And I think I did it quite a while at Ricky's before I got to the point that I was like, no, I'm actually going to do this. And I remember being in the class and being like, I'm going to become a ceramicist, and telling the other students, and the other students looking at me and being like, I'm sorry, what? Like, you're going to give up your job, go and do pottery full time? And I was like, yeah, I am. And the only similar kind of situation I can attribute it to is, imagine going to like a weekly dance class and someone being in your class and being like, I'm going to become a dancer. Everyone's going to be like, no, babe, you're like far too old and it's far too late in life, and you stick with what you're doing. And all of those feelings and thoughts people have, I did. I decided to leave, and I rented some shared studio space. So I rented shared studio space in a couple of different places. One of them no longer exists anymore. It was called the Brontosaurus Social Club, and it was in Caledonian Road. That was a bit of a trek to get to. I also rented some space for a short time in the chocolate factory. But the annoying thing with having the rented space was that I was still working. So I was still doing shoots. So if I got a job as a stylist and I'd be off for a couple of weeks, it would be... So I'm looking at a dog. I wouldn't be able to get into the studio. I then ended up assisting for a little while another lovely ceramic artist called Mandy Gage. She has a studio over in Stoke Newington, and I would sort of help her out. One Christmas I sort of helped her out with the shop, and she let me kind of use her wheel and fire some stuff in her kiln, and you know, it was just kind of rolling. And I was like, right, I really need to make this jump now. I really need to make this next step into the ceramics. Some stuff happened in my personal life that changed things for me, and I had a spare room at home, and I basically was like, you know, if this room's not gonna have the intended use, then I could make this into a home studio. Like, why not make some lemonade out of these lemons? So it was at that point I thought, right, I'm gonna do a Kickstarter and raise the money to have my own wheel and my own kiln at home. But I feel like this is getting quite long, so maybe this is gonna be a part 1 and we'll do a part 2. Tune in then.